Hey everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll be touching on or discussing the ins and outs, best practices, shortcuts for estimating your lighting fixtures. And I think I'm going to jump in pretty quickly into this with Brian, but I just wanted to mention you can chat or ask questions over on the right panel in YouTube. And we usually get to all the questions that are posted there. And so share your shout outs or questions or whatever you want to say over there, and we will see them. So I guess we'll just roll right into it today, Brian.
Okay, we'll get rolling here.
All right.
So, probably the first thing that comes to mind about the light fixture takeoff, the most important thing is the labor. That's really the most important part of your fixture takeoff because your cost of your fixtures is something you get a quote on. So, we're mainly trying to think about things that affect the labor on your fixture takeoff. And always the first thing that comes to my mind is the ceiling height. Because if it's not going into a normal 8, 10, 12-foot ceiling, then we've got to be thinking about how that affects the labor on the fixtures. Um, EBM has several ways to adjust for labor on individual fixtures or the overall fixture part of the job, but that's one of the first things that you should think about when you're taking off the fixtures is what's the ceiling height. Now, usually we're working in two-dimensional drawings and we don't see the ceiling height. So you might have to go to the architecturals. If you're familiar with the type of building, sometimes it's pretty obvious. If it's a regular office building and you know there aren't high ceilings, then you can kind of move on from that. But if you're in a warehouse or if you're in a big open area, maybe a church, maybe some kind of a building where there's a high ceiling, then that's the kind of thing you want to look at. And you might have to take a few minutes to look at the architecturals if you're not familiar with the particular building that you're working with. The other thing about light fixtures that affects the labor is density. The closer together the fixtures, the less time it takes. And this is a little table that you might want to refer to if you're going to be looking at the density. Now, this is the density in a specific area, not the overall job. But again, if you've got an office area or you've got a warehouse area and the density, if you get up to the 25 or more range and 25 or more fixtures in that area, then you can look at these numbers as a reduction factor because you're going to get a little better production because things are more dense closer together. And the other thing about labor is when you come across a unique fixture. So, it could be some kind of this is some kind of a fancy LED chandelier. It could be just a traditional chandelier with light fixtures. In EBM, we can make adjustments for those. Let me just flip over to EBM for just a quick little example. So first of all, if I've got a fixture, I've already got one here, fixture A. Oh, that's not the one I wanted, A1. Okay, so here's just a basic 2x4 LED lay-in. If I want to adjust the labor for this fixture, under select items here, we've got labor adders and labor deducts. So you can tell it to deduct a tenth of an hour or a quarter of an hour or whatever you need to from the fixture. So if it's in a dense location again, you can choose one of those locations. If you're not sure how much you're going to reduce the labor, choose open, and then later it'll ask you how much to reduce the labor. Now you can do that for all the A1 fixtures, or you can do it for just the A1 fixtures in a particular area. If you're going to do it in a particular area, you would do it over here under additional accessories, and then you would tell it how many fixtures you're going to reduce the labor by, let's say 0.25. That's about 50% on this particular fixture. So let's say we've got 100 of them, and we'll take in 100 there and hit takeoff. And you'll see the labor reduction down here, taking off 0.25 hours, all the fixtures, all those A1 fixtures. The other thing I was mentioning is if you have an oddball fixture, we're going to call it a C3 for a chandelier. Instead of trying to find something in the database, you can just simply type it in. You can type in large LED. I can try to type it in there. Chandelier. You can still put accessories. Sometimes the chandeliers actually have LED light bulbs in them. let's say there's 15 light bulbs, and I could put a box in there. Instead of a regular outlet box, I could do a ceiling fan box, and then you could put the quantity here. So the thing, this feature, the key to it is I typed in the description, so it doesn't have anything in the database to reference. So when I hit takeoff here, it's going to ask me how much labor. I can put in 6 hours, or if I leave it open, it'll ask me later. So there's a lot of ways to handle the labor factoring on fixtures. But again, think about ceiling height, think about density, and when you come across an oddball fixture, you can make up your own labor units. And sometimes what you might want to do is just go search the internet and see if you can get a picture of the fixture. Usually on the fixture schedule, they give you a catalog number or a model. You might even be able to get an idea what the fixture looks like. So the other thing about fixtures, one of the other things about fixtures is that you're going to typically get a quote. The program, EBM, and I don't think any of the programs put in a price on the lighting. So one of the first things an estimator may want to do is get the counts, take off the fixtures and get the counts to your suppliers that you're going to want to quote from. Now, the irony of that is that rarely will you get the fixtures and prices until the last minute. They hold those prices right to the best up until the last few minutes before the bid. So you rush to get them out to them, and then they hold them as long as they can. Obviously, they don't want you to shop the prices around, so they have to hold on to them for as long as possible. If you've ever had a situation where you get direct pricing from the manufacturer, I've run into this a number of times, especially on larger jobs, or maybe it's a negotiated job and you're in control to some extent of the products or the lighting that's going to be used. You can sometimes work directly with the manufacturer or the manufacturer's rep to get pricing on the fixtures. That might get you a little better edge than everybody else on the street if you are bidding against other people. But sometimes it's worth it to at least look into the opportunity to get pricing directly from the manufacturer. You're still going to buy it through the wholesaler, but then he can help you with the pricing maybe so you can get a little better edge on the pricing. But again, fixtures are always quoted. Even a little package with, half a dozen different fixtures, you still need to get a quote. And I've run into this a few times too. I remember when I bid one of the first large jobs way back when. Back then, it was probably $250,000 lighting package, which today is not a big deal, but in today's dollars, that might be $2 or $3 million. That quote may be negotiable. You kind of got to consider that into your strategy. You've got a $500,000 or $1 million fixture quote. If you don't at least consider that there's some room to negotiate, maybe after you get the job, it's something you want to consider when you're putting your final price together. Maybe you've got a few extra $1,000s to work with that you can get when it comes to actually making the purchase. Substitutions are something that comes up quite a bit. I run across this all the time when I'm helping people with bids. Um, just did one last week or the week before last with a customer, and um, the lighting supplier that was, or the lighting manufacturer that was specified was LSI, and they had to make a decision on whether they were going to use the LSI pricing, which I guess was a little on the high side, not a real competitive fixture line. And then you've got to decide when you get your quotes whether you're going to allow the supplier to give you substitutions or not. Sometimes they won't tell you. They'll just put in a substitute package that they think is going to be that they can get approval on, and you won't even know. But it's something you need to be aware of, that substitutions happen all the time. If you are substituting the light fixtures, it's something you probably want to qualify on your bid. Um, Again, if it's especially if it's a significant part of your bid, if you're putting in a substitute package that's knocking a lot of the total cost out of the lighting, then in your proposal you want to specify that you're providing a substitute lighting package subject to approval. Something that happens once in a while, and I mean maybe fairly often on the fixture takeoff, is that your fixture schedule with these letters F and EX1 and all that G1, there may be fixtures on the drawings that aren't on the schedule. What do you do about that? The opposite happens. There's a fixture on the schedule that's not on the drawings. That's not as much of a problem. If this fixture EX2, for example, is not on the drawings, then we just don't get a quote on it. If the opposite happens, though, there's a fixture EX3 that's on the drawings, it's not on the schedule, then we need to deal with it. It might be simple, it may be just another variation of the exit light, or it might be something that we really need to get some information on. We might have to send out an RFI to the architect or the engineer and find out what that fixture is, or we can exclude it too. We, in our proposal, we can exclude fixture EX3 from our quote because it's not shown on the schedule. So you've got some options there, but just be aware that it's not unusual to have fixtures that aren't shown on the schedule, and there's also fixtures that are shown in the drawings that aren't on the schedule, vice versa. And this is one I ran into again just a couple weeks ago. Sometimes the fixture schedule, they'll give you the counts. They'll tell you there's 10 of the fixture F and 10 of the fixture E1 and 100 of the fixture G1 or whatever it is. You cannot rely on those counts. You've got to actually verify them. The example I was working on a few weeks ago was a project that had 3 buildings. Had exactly the same fixture schedule for all 3 buildings, but the counts were different. They were pretty close on the first building, but they weren't even in the same universe on the second one. The second building had literally twice as many fixtures, and if the contractor had not caught that, and the supplier had quoted on the quantities on the fixture schedule, which is what they did initially, the lighting quote would have been way low, and somebody would have had a problem. That's not a situation you want to get into where your counts are off. So you got to verify the counts. Just because it's on the schedule doesn't mean it's correct. One of the things you want to be working with these days on lighting is luminary cable. If you've got lighting control, you can use the luminary cable for the lighting control as well as any dimmable fixtures. In EVM, I'll just switch back there a quick second. If you're taking off a light fixture, let's just do I'm going to do a 2x2 LED lay-in. If I want to include, instead of a regular fixture whip with MC cable, we have this tab here for conduit wire and cable. You go to cable and you can pick luminary cable. And we can put 20 feet or so per fixture. Same thing when you're taking off the devices. If I'm going to take off an occupancy sensor, quoted or priced, it doesn't matter. Let's say I've got a low voltage one here, and I want to include some luminary cable or low voltage wire. Over here in the cable list, I've got luminary cable. A little further down there, I've got Cat 5e and Cat 6. So we can include any kind of luminary or low voltage cable with the actual device takeoff as well. I'm out here in California, and the lighting control is a big part of your bid because almost all of the lighting is going to have either be dimmable or have some kind of lighting control. So pretty much all of the fixtures are taken off. The best way to do it is with luminary cable. There's no reason to run separate low voltage wires if you can run it in the luminary cable. If you're not familiar with luminary cable, it's just like MC cable, but you can see there's 2 extra wires, low voltage wires, 16 gauge, that are built into the MC cable. So you don't have to run them separately, and it's a pretty significant labor savings. The cable's more expensive, but the labor savings by not having to run the extra low voltage wires is very significant. The lighting control itself is typically quoted on the larger jobs if there's a lighting control package with sensors and dimmable fixtures and all that. The lighting control devices will typically be included with the supplier's quote on the lighting, or they might break it out. But again, it's on a larger job, they're typically going to quote the lighting control devices as part of what your part of your lighting package. One of the shortcuts I teach for home runs and lighting is to go to the panel schedule and find out or figure out, count up the number of lighting circuits. because really what determines the home runs for any part of the job, but we're talking about lighting specifically, is the number of circuits for the lighting. Most of the lighting will be on 20 amp circuits. So if you go to the panel schedules and count up the total number of lighting circuits, let's say there's 30 lighting circuits. I typically figure we're going to run 3 circuits in a home run. So I know I'm going to need 10 home runs for the lighting. In a home run, I typically put 7 number 12 wires, or if they're longer, I might put 7 number 10 wires. That'll give me my 3 circuits with my grounds and my neutrals and all that. And then all I need is the average distance of the home run. So you look at the building. Let's say the building is 100 feet wide and 50 feet the other direction. I typically take half of the longest dimension. So this case would be half of 100. Round it up a little bit. Let's say it's, again, we need 10 circuits for the lighting home run. So we'd put a total of 600 feet in, 10 runs for each for all the lighting home runs. So again, you take the number of lighting circuits, divide it by 3, take half of the longest dimension on the building and divide it by 2, round it up a little bit. So if we need 10 home runs at 60 feet apiece, it would be 600 feet and 10 runs. The supports on the lighting, I'm going to show you this in EBM, how I would do it. So let's go back to EBM. So I would do that in wire and conduit and branch circuits. Our shortcut button up here for saved assemblies is going to have a typical example here. Under EMT, set screw steel stranded wire, I'm going to do 3/4 inch with 7 number 12s. And so again, we say we need 10 60-foot home runs. That would be 600 feet total. Excuse me, and 10 runs. I also like to throw in 10 J boxes with each of those. Little shortcut for that. And if you want to be even a little more detail oriented, you could put in lighting home runs. 6 at, or 10, sorry, at 60 feet each. Come on. There we go. So down here in the bottom, you'll see the 600 feet of conduit, the wires. So the support I use here for most of the home runs on lighting is a beam clamp with a conduit hanger. That's a pretty good universal support because typically your home runs are going to be run overhead. So rather than just a 1-hole strap or a 2-hole strap, I usually change that to the beam clamp. And there's that little note down here at the bottom. There we go. So what about owner furnished lighting? Not an unusual situation where the owner is going to provide part or all the fixtures. Now, sometimes it's just going to be the special fixtures, maybe like the chandeliers or any other special fixtures that they're going to pick out later or that need to be determined or not, that they're going to provide the pricing on them. Sometimes they provide the pricing, the owner provides the pricing, the cost of all the fixtures. So the problem that creates is that you need to adjust the markup. If you've got $100,000, what would normally be a $100,000 lighting package, and you were going to normally mark that up 10, 15, 20%, you just gave away that markup because they're providing it and you're not marking it up. And that's what they're hoping you're going to do, which isn't really the smart thing to do. And there's a couple ways to handle that. You could probably kind of try to figure out what the lighting package would cost, but that's a pretty big guess. Because it could be a $50,000 or a $150,000 lighting package. A better way to do this, and I've talked about this in other webinars, is to figure out what your overhead is as a dollar amount per hour. So just a real simple calculation. Where's my little calculator? So let's say I've got 10 electricians and they work 40 hours a week and 4 weeks a month on average. So my total number of hours is 1,600. And let's say my overhead is $30,000. if I divide that 1,600 into the 30,000, my cost just for the overhead, I need to make $18.75 per hour just to cover my overhead. And that doesn't matter whether we're buying $1 worth of material that month or $10 million worth of material. The overhead is related to just the cost of the labor in the field. The way you'd plug that into EBM is this. Under reports, job totals, there's an option here where it says overhead. And instead of doing it by the entire job as a percentage, you come up here and do by category. And I'm going to change this to 1875. And then it recalculates. So I think that's a much more realistic way to do it. So then if my lighting quote is 0, doesn't matter. I'm still going to make my overhead on my labor. Okay.
That's for owner furnished.
Owner furnished, yep.
Yeah.
But again, we take out the quote because we're not going to price the lighting. So I think that's a pretty interesting way to look at all jobs, whether it's owner furnished or not. Take a little time to figure out what it costs you per hour just to pay the overhead on the company. It's kind of a very important number because your material pricing can vary. Some jobs it's 90% of your cost, some jobs it's 10%. Usually it's around 50%, but when it's not in that normal range, you really need to stop and look at your cost of labor per hour just to recover your overhead. I think that's it, Derek. Any questions?
Not so far. I've been sharing a lot of links to. We had some previous videos where we did one similar to this, but a little deeper dive into how to use EBM to do things. And then we had another one about lighting controls that I shared with everybody.
Sure.
Well, I didn't mention this earlier, but while we're hanging out here to see if anybody has any questions, be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Hit the thumbs up on it, please. It gets us out there more to more people, and if you subscribe to our channel, you'll get alerts, I believe via email. It'll let you know when we have a live coming up, so you can be reminded of that. And what else here? What else do we have? Yeah, we keep creating more videos. If you ever have any ideas or you'd like to see us cover something, let us know. Chat us, leave a comment on one of our webinars. We see all those. We try to respond to all the comments on our YouTube videos the same day. Sometimes it might take us a little longer if we're busy. But yeah, feel free to comment on any of our videos. We'll get back to you. Let's see, what else can we cover here?
As far as training, most of the stuff we do these days is virtual. You can typically new customers get a couple of hours with their initial purchase. But if you've got a new employee or you need some additional training, you can always purchase one-on-one additional training by the hour. You can do more than 1 hour. We also do virtual training, a virtual classroom training, where you'd be in a virtual classroom with anywhere from 3 to 4, maybe 5 other companies. And it's like a classroom because I can see everybody's screen and I can share my screen and show you things. And it's a pretty neat little setup. It's always good, I think, one-on-one training is great because it's very specific and can be dialed into exactly what you need help with. But the classroom training is always valuable too because you'll hear questions from other people that may give you a different insight as to some of the things you've been running across. We also do on-site training. I typically go out to different customers' offices anywhere from 2 to 3 times a month. Those are usually 2 days or so. And again, that can be very customized. So if you need more than a couple people trained, or if you need some specific help with customizing the program, we can do that too.
Yep, and our online training, we've been doing it for like 3 years now, I think. About 3 years, and it still sells out. So be sure to take a look. We do send out emails. We try our best to remind people that what our schedule is upcoming if by email, but it's always on our website. If you
Yeah,
go
the
look
dates
at
are
our
always
training
posted on the
section.
website, and
Hmm.
if we need to, we'll add classes, and then you always have the option to do a one-on-one also.
Yeah, I have a comment. I'm just going to respond to Jesse here. Jesse, reach out to our support department and we'll get that fixed up for you. I'm going to give you a link to create a support case. Let's see here. Yep. Looks like this topic doesn't stir up a bunch of questions.
Yeah, we got a
Which is
good number of
fine.
signups, but
Yeah.
I guess I answered all the questions.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like I think we had like 140 people register for this one, which is a record for us. The videos get watched a lot more than that later down the road, but
Yeah.
it's always nice to see when people show interest right up front. It kind of helps us understand that we're doing the right thing because we want to cover topics that people care about or people want to learn about as our focus. All right, David has a comment here.
Okay.
Would recommend creating new fixture types in the database or just typing in the description. Would you recommend maybe?
It's kind of a judgment call. If you think it's something you're going to be using in the future and you've got a good handle on what the labor would be, and you can always look at similar fixtures. It doesn't really matter whether it's a 2x4 or a 1x4 or even a 2x2. It's pretty similar for a lay-in fixture. So you could always copy the labor from an existing fixture. But from that point on, it's a judgment call. If it's something you need to look at on a job by job basis, or it's a really unique fixture, then you maybe don't need to add it to the database. Or if you do, don't put a labor unit in. Just leave it open. You can always check open for the labor, and then it will prompt you on every time you take off that fixture. Again, it's always a judgment call whether you add things to the system, and lighting is probably one of the more comprehensive areas because there's so many different types of lighting. Um, but if you think it's something you're going to use, add it, and then if you think you can put labor units in, go ahead and put them in. I just wanted to give you that option because you don't have to stop and add something to the database if you just want to plug it in for a specific job. Just type in the description and it'll prompt you for the labor.
All right, got another one here. Nick, if you add a fixture, will it automatically update in the database?
I guess I don't understand the question because the whole point of the lighting is that the system doesn't put a price in on the lighting. The fixtures themselves are always going to be quoted, even on small jobs.
Yeah, Nick, maybe a little bit of extra detail. I'm trying to think of. I mean, we have fixtures in the database.
But none of them have pricing. Now you could go into Epic and look up
Right.
pricing, but Epic's only going to cover the mainstream, really common fixtures. And more importantly, when you get a quote on a lighting package, the pricing they use is really uh, designed just for that job. So the suppliers are going to price it and mark it up specifically for the job that they're quoting you on.
All right.
And I
Go
don't
ahead.
know what they do. What they do with their markups, that's kind of a whole mystery. But it's not like buying conduit or wire where the commodity prices are pretty similar from supplier to supplier and manufacturer to manufacturer. Lighting is a real unique part of the job. That's why you got to get a quote.
So Nick's follow-up is when you add labor hours for the new fixture, is that per fixture or
Yes,
total for all like fixture types? So
it's
you
all
said,
it's yeah, it's everything in the fixtures is per fixture. Whether you're putting a half an hour or 2.5 hours per fixture, it's always per fixture.
maybe we need to add a tooltip for that if there isn't one. Because that sounds familiar. Like I've heard that question before.
Well, it's kind of consistent with everything else we do in the system. You know, when you take off a
Mm-hmm.
receptacle or a switch or a anything, it's always per item.
Right.
The lighting is a lump sum. I think that's the difference with the lighting. They typically give you a lump sum quote on all the lighting or a lump sum quote on all the gear. They don't break it out. But in the labor part, it's always per fixture, per item, per device, etc. With conduit, it'd be per foot, wires per foot.
Right. Yeah, when Brian added a large chandelier, would that pop back up later, or is that a one-time entry? Assuming I would need to reference that specific fixture again.
Let me just flip back there for a second. When you add the fixture, again, you type, let's start a new one. I call it C4. So when you type in a description here, that's for this job only. Now, when you take it off, it'll prompt you for the labor. If you fill it in now, that's the last time it's going to ask you for the job. If you don't know what you want to put in, you check open, and then when you run your job extension report, it'll ask you for the labor, and you plug it in at that point. So if I don't check open, it'll be done. And you'll see at the last item here, there's the labor, 5 hours each. It assumes it's a quoted item. And when you run your job extension, it'll be down here a ways. Where's that fixture right there? Was it C? Where did it put it? There's C1s, C4. Where's my search button here? I think that's what I called it.
Yeah, I don't remember. I looked away.
maybe it was C3. It'd help if I type it right. Let's go back and look here. There's C4. Let's just do the report. There's C4. And spreadsheet. There it is. Oh, I don't know what's going on, Derek.
Yeah. Does it not have a phase for some weird reason?
It should.
Yeah, I don't know either. I have a couple more. I have a couple more questions.
Okay. It should be in fixtures, quoted. I'll have to go look at that afterwards. But anyway.
Maybe EBM hates your description. It's like, nope.
No. I don't know. I must have something filtered on either the audit trail or the job extension. Anyway.
All right. Next question. Brent, how do you add seismic wire, labor, and material to your fixture unit price? Pencil rod, seismic wire.
Okay, so on the fixture takeoff, there's an accessory. Doesn't matter what the designation is. When you go to select items, it's under support materials. and there's the seismic wire. Now, in I believe this item does have a price and a labor unit, but you could adjust it. Excuse me. So it's plugging in $2 for each seismic wire, and it's got labor units here. Um, so you can either use that price, or you can change the price, or you can even make it a quoted item if you wanted to assume the supplier would quote that with the fixture. Like a pennant, for example, that's typically quoted with the fixture. So there's no price on the fixture or the pennant itself, because it would be on the report you send to your supplier with what you want quoted.
Hmm.
Seismic wire is, again, you can just put a number in there. What we just do is we just put in $2 to cover the seismic wire. Maybe a better term for that is ceiling wire. Seismic wire is kind of a California term because we have earthquakes out here more than other areas, but it's just the wire that is run from the fixture to the building structure.
All right. Excellent. Gary, when we have a special fixture, we have a list in the database that simply says special fixture, 2 hours, etc.
Okay,
We have a range of these listings,
that's good.
listing many different labor hours, such as
Sure,
2.5, 3, etc.
that sounds.
It's good use.
Yep, that sounds good.
Cool. Thanks, Gary. Joshua, you did your home runs by taking an average using the building length. Is that your best practice, or do you ever calculate the lengths of the individual home runs?
I rarely calculate the length of the individual home runs because I think that's, first of all, very time consuming, and it's a guessing game. When they get out there in the field, they're going to figure out what they think is the best way to do the home runs. So if they can do if they've got a better way to do it, that's all the better. But estimating is all about averages. So trying to lay out the home runs on every job for the lighting and laying out the home runs for all the branch power, I think is just overkill and doesn't necessarily get you a more accurate bid. Uh, I think averages really are better. Now, again, you have to use them with some common sense. If there's something about the particular job where that shortcut doesn't make sense because the building's a weird shape or just any other factors that are involved there. Um, but I think that's a really good shortcut, is to take half of the longest distance in the building. Then if you stop and think about it, what's the average home run going to be? If you've got, doesn't matter where the panels are, the average distance from any location back to the panel, the average is going to be half the distance of the building. Sometimes it'll be 10 foot if it's 100-foot wide. Sometimes it'll be 90, but it's going to be average in the middle.
Yeah, I definitely get Joshua's concern. We have users that run the gamut, right? Some are super detail oriented and they'll spend 2, 3, 4 times as much time on a bid, and others are on the opposite side of the spectrum and love all
Right.
the shortcuts because they've come to realize it's an estimate, right? And it's going to be different, like you said. How it's run in the field might be different than how you bid it.
Right. It almost always will be, um, and that'll depend on the electricians who are doing the job as to their experience and their preferences. And as an estimator, you kind of have to hit somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, I think it's just you find where you're comfortable when in your bids and how much you're willing to kind of take shortcuts as
Yep.
you as you kind of squeeze in a shortcut or two here and there, and then you find, what, that actually worked pretty nice, and then you do another one, and
A good example would be a parking lot lighting. I don't think I would use any kind of a shortcut there. I would measure from pole to pole to pole back to the building. But the lighting in the building and the devices in the building, I think you can get by with using some shortcuts. Again, on the other end, if I've got a couple receptacles up on the roof, I'm going to have to measure those home runs, just like I'm going to have to measure the home run for all the HVAC units. I'm not going to use an average unless I'm really short on time. I want to measure those because they're not really appropriate to use the averages on. But if you're looking at an office building, a school, a retail, most of the time the averages work pretty well for the home runs, and they work pretty well for the average length of wiring you put in with each of the devices.
All right, that was a good question. I think shortcuts can be scary sometimes.
Yeah, they can be.
All right. Well, I think that covers all our questions, and we're a little long anyway.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and be sure to take a look at the links I put earlier in the chat if you're here now or watching this later. Links to some other relative videos and information about EBM and our training if that interests you. I think that's all. Anything else, Brian?
That's all I got. Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day. If you're on live with us, thank you.
All right.
Bye
Bye-bye.
now.